Okay.
Welcome to Reality Coaching for Writers. Today, the question is, how can you make your reader the hero of the story in the nonfiction book you're writing? Diana, welcome to Reality Coaching for Writers, where...
Hello, Eddie.
Ciao. What do we offer to our audience?
Oh, yes. No fluff, just the real stuff you need.
Yep, just the real stuff we need. That's right. So that's the question. We a couple of episodes ago, you had Zena Del Lo on, which I love. And I went back and I think I watched that episode twice because Zena's one of these people that when I go to a writers' conferences, I go to her classes and take lots of notes.
Yes, same here.
She and Stephen James and Ron and Al and all the others. But she made a really good point, and it's something that it stuck with me because the first pirate novel that I wrote, I sent it to Mary Denman, who does headshots at the Blue Ridge Conference. Mary's a good friend of mine, and I sent her the draft version of The Curse of the Black Avenger. She said, "Eddie, the writing's really good. It's a fun story." She said, "But your main character's passive. He's reacting to everything." And I was like, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, he's not taking the lead." And so everything Zena talked about really resonated with me because that was something early on that I had to overcome as a novelist, is to make my character the lead character, the one doing all the action. And so that got me to thinking about nonfiction books because we like to balance this out between novelists and fiction and nonfiction.
Right.
And I guess what prompted it was I was thinking, how many times do I have really great knowledge? And you and I have sat across from people that have pitched us a nonfiction book, and they said, I know this stuff, and I've taught it, I've did sermons on it, da 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 da. And in the back of our minds, we're going, yes, but what's in it for the reader?
Right.
What's in it for the reader? And that really is kind of what I want to talk about today is if you've got what you think is a really great nonfiction book, how is the reader going to be the main character in your story, in that story you're writing, in that book you're writing? And I was just wondering, do you have any thoughts on that, or have you got any examples, or did you run across anything like that when you were, hearing pitches from authors?
Well, it's always about the takeaway. And it's a mantra that you and I repeat over and over with debut new people to the writing, they're in their writing journey, is always keep the reader in mind. Always keep your reader in mind. So with your reader in mind, how are you going to help them to take what you've given them and apply it to their life? So I think, Eddie, in our discussion prior to preparing this episode, you mentioned action steps.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So
And I really don't have a formula for this. I can only come at it, and again, this is me being transparent and just kind of overlaying what I know about plot and story, overlaying it onto nonfiction, and trying to see whether or not some of these ideas that I'm sitting here looking on my whiteboard, books I've got, whether the Tales of John Mark, for example, and the Pirate Gospel, for example, People We Meet on the Way to the Cross, which is another book I'd like to write. I'm working on. And I'm sitting there going, okay, but how am I going to make the reader the main character in the story? Because if I can't, then I don't really need to write the book. It's just information. It's just information. So when I'm thinking about action steps for that, again, my mind goes to the plot structure of the 3-act structure. And I'm thinking, well, first you have to introduce your main character, which is the reader.
Right.
So, and I'm not saying this is the way you need to write a book. This is just the way my brain is thinking. But I think now, if I were going to do it, I would say I'm going to introduce the reader as the main character in the story, and this is the biography of the reader. This is who the reader is. Her name is Diana Flagle. She used to be a literary agent. She lives at the beach. Her heart's at the beach, and she's a writer's coach now. This is who she is. And then the second thing I want to know is, well, what does Diana want more than anything in the world? And Diana, maybe you can be transparent. Tell me, what would you like to have more than anything in the world? If you could do anything or be it, what would it be? What would it be?
I want to have words of life for people. That's my main objective with all my relationships. And I really want boldness
Okay.
So Eddie, I see us bringing the reader in right away by presenting a problem that we can help
so
the, yeah.
and that's going to get to the next step, because in plot, we know that you introduce the main reader and what the reader want more than anything in the world. Normally we do this with the Hallmark formula, but anyway, the third thing is the inciting incident. What blows up your reader's world, right? And that is going to be the problem. That is the problem. That's the reason they're buying the book. Their world blew up in some aspect of their world has blown up or is disturbed or not. There's trouble. There's always trouble in Mayberry. That's the way Mayberry episodes always open. There was trouble in Mayberry, and that was the story for that episode. So you're right. We have to bring in what is the problem for the reader? What do they need to address to get back to normal? Because again, that's really kind of what we're looking for when we have a problem, is we want things to get back to the way they were, get back settled again. So you're right. Yeah, early, I think if we were coaching nonfiction writers early on, bring in that problem and go, here, Diana Flagle, living at the beach, wanting to have words that are leaving, readers impacted for life. What is the main problem? Well, let's just say that the main problem is I can write really well, but I can't find any way for people to hear what I'm saying. Okay. And maybe let's move it away from you a little bit and go, let's say we've got a street preacher standing on a corner in a downtown big city preaching the gospel and nobody's paying attention, right? Good words, preaching Jesus, but people are passing him or her by, right? How do you get the words? How do people hear you, right? That's your problem. And you're going to go, okay, this is the focus of the book. We're going to help you find your audience, so that you're not sitting on the street floor to do nothing, right? So that's the third step of the plot. And again, we're just kind of winging this, but the next two things are going to be the call to action. One is the logical call to action, and this is the one I think you and I hear most often when authors are pitching us a nonfiction book. It's their motivation for writing the book. So logically, we've heard this before. People need to hear more about Jesus Christ. Kids today need to be reading more stories from a biblical worldview. That's a logical perspective, right?
Right.
And that's from the head. And yes, we get that. But that's not going to get anybody to read the book, right?
Right. Yeah.
The next thing, it has to be on an emotional level. It has to be on an emotional level. And that's where I think for the nonfiction writer, it gets a little more difficult, because we sometimes have a hard time connecting how are we going to reach the emotion of the reader. And you and I both know this, and then I'm going to hush up and let you comment on this. We both know if you can hit the emotion of the reader, they'll buy the book. They'll buy the book.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's so good. And we talked about that last week with Craig Von Gusick about how story connects with the reader often in nonfiction. So go ahead.
Yeah, and that's one area that I'm kind of brainstorming now. I'm thinking, how can you take a nonfiction book that's full of great information, right, and hit it on an emotional level? And normally it has to do, I'm trying to think of how it works in fiction. Normally it is reaching people. You're doing it where it's trying to reach somebody that's vulnerable, doesn't have a lot of resources. And if you don't take care of this, they're going to die. Okay. That's, in other words, you come at it from the logical standpoint is, yes, this kid needs a heart transplant. I get that, but we've got that many other people that need heart transplants that are higher on the list. And this kid doesn't have any way to pay for the heart. He couldn't pay for the heart transplant. He needed that kind of thing. But you bring the little boy in, or the little girl, and have them meet the doctor or the physician and go, here's her name. Her name is Selma. She's 7 years old and she likes to play soccer. That's what Sally Fields used to do all the time with those commercials where, she would show her little kids in Africa. Everybody was sending money to Sally Fields, That was that emotional appeal. And so I guess what I'm saying is, in a nonfiction book, early on, you're going to have to show a character. It's almost like Save the Cat. It's almost like that. You've got to show a character that's vulnerable, that doesn't have any resources, and if you don't help them, nobody's going to help them. They're literally going to waste away. And we can almost transfer that appeal to almost any issue in the culture or society we're working with. If we don't step up and do something about sex trafficking,
Yeah.
our granddaughters are going to be the next ones. We can, that's an appeal. If we don't do something about the drug addiction problem in this country, our grandsons are going to be the ones that never make it out of high school. If we don't do something about homelessness, violent crime, or guns, or something else, right? That's what you're doing. You're appealing to the reader on an emotional basis about something that everybody can kind of agree on. Yeah, that's bad. We need a solution.
Well, and it's like what you said, Eddie, you do that by giving them a face and a name to the problem, and helping people realize it's not just intellectual, like you said, it's that emotional connection. And one of the books that I'm reading right now, and I've been recommending, is Christian's Guide to Mental Illness. And this is a book I have been waiting many, many years for. And I love the way it's presented. I love the way they come at the problem. And they bring action steps at the end of every chapter. They give you the information. They tie a personal story to it. And then, like, I'll give you an instance when they were just giving you definitions, because we tend to clump everything under one heading of mental illness, but they break it down and just tell you that's anxiety, it's depression, it's fear. There's so many things that, if taken to an extreme, can actually be labeled mental illness. And they give you statistics, but then at the end they give a story, and there's always a person story. And then they give you action steps. For instance, here's 4. Ask God to replace your prejudices, your error and confusion with truth, facts, and clarity. I love that. Ask God to help you, because we all come at certain topics like homelessness. We have an opinion, but it doesn't mean that opinion is based on facts. So, I love that action step, because boy, having a son that's dealt with bipolar illness and all the crazy things people have said to us that were not true, and more harmful to our son than helpful to our son. I would love if those people prayed and asked God to help them redefine, that. So it's a great book. It gives you great information, ties in a personal story of someone dealing with some facet of mental illness, and then gives you action steps to pray about, to do within your community and reach out. So
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, I like that, because the coming out of an old sales background, if you have goals, then you set goals and you create an action plan, right? And that allows you to check off and see whether or not you're actually reaching your goal. If you don't have action steps, you never know if you get to your goal or not, because you don't know where you're going, right? But that's the thing with an action step. If we're praying that particular prayer in this instance, and you're going to check back a week from now, 2 weeks from now, has your attitude changed? Have you have you coincidentally bumped into a whole lot of people that are exactly the kind of person that you don't want to be dealing with? That you're going, okay, wait a minute. I prayed this thing, I asked for this, and now I've got 3 other people with what seems to be the same mental illness that are just rubbing me the wrong way. Hello, maybe this is the Lord giving you an opportunity to take action and deal with this. No, I like that. I like that. And so that's, I think, what we're talking about in the first act of this nonfiction book, introduce your main character, who's your reader. You're going to set them up so that they know they're the main character in the story. They're the one that's going to be changed from this nonfiction book you're writing. You introduce what they want more than anything in the world. Well, in your case, with your son, and I'm not going to name his name, but with him, you would love for him to be healed, or at least get in a place where he's safe. You know, if not healed, at least safe, right? And that's you and I know, you know this. I pray for him every day that the Lord provides a hedge of protection with the angels around him and keeps him safe and keeps him from harming others. You know, that prayer, I believe God honors that prayer. So that's your desire. And then the inciting incident is, well, something happens and he gets, you know, his world blows up and he's not in a normal safe place. Now you got to get it fixed, you know. So anyway, that's kind of how Act 1 would work, you know, like we talked about.
And just real quick, and then you can get into Act 2, is it also, my problem is I need language to help express myself better to others. So that's the other problem that I'm going to the book for, as you know, that's me as the main character. What I'm looking for to solve also is to get language to help me better advocate for that community. So that's part of the problem.
So when you get into Act 2 in story, the very first thing that you're supposed to do is introduce a problem that doesn't really have anything to do, doesn't always have anything to do with the main part of the book. It's just your character needs to face a problem because they have been promised that the second part of the story, the Act 2 part, is going to be good. It's going to be good. That's why we read these stories, and that's why Hallmark does so well, is because, you know, she leaves, she goes off, she goes to the small town, and she's got this opportunity to run an apple farm, and she's going to make up $1 gazillion and never have to work again, and sleep late, drink coffee, But the first thing that happens when she gets to the small town is, you know, the tractor doesn't run, and the pigs have eaten up all the trees and everything. Those are problems, right? So there's a reality check that probably needs to come early, right after Act 2 in a nonfiction book. There's a reality check, and you've got to set the expectations of the reader in reality and go, this is not going to be an easy journey. If we're talking about mental illness, it's not an easy journey. There are cycles to this. And if you don't begin to prepare mentally now for this, you are going to be disappointed and give up, right? So there's going to have to be that hard truth coming early in the nonfiction book, so the reader doesn't think it's just all fluff and that it's all magic and, you know, miracles, you know. So you need to set that. There would be I would say recommend just a chapter of these are some of the hurdles that we are going to face, and this is the first one you're going to have to face. Number one, you may want your child to be in a mental institution, a good one. You got no money and no insurance to do it. And the waiting list for the people that do have the money and insurance is so long that even if you did, you wouldn't be able to get it. I mean, that's a reality check, right? We all know people who have mental issues of all types who cannot get the help they need right now just because there aren't enough nurses and facilities. All right. So that's a reality check chapter. And then the third one, the next step is going to be the status change. And that is where your main character has to change to a 180-degree turn from what they were before to what they're going to be now, right? And that's a little bit about what you hinted at a minute ago about prayer. Because once we start praying for these things, most of the time it's us that gets changed, you know. So that's go ahead.
One thing that came to my mind, you were saying that, Eddie, is I can't fix the whole world system as far as mental health is concerned. I would like to wave a magic wand. So my reality check in reading things is asking for the small part I can play. What is my part? Help me take the broad, boil it down to me reading one chapter in that middle section to say, oh, this is it. This is the thing that I can do that can make a difference. So that kind of goes along with the fiction plot line as well.
Yeah, and I'll kind of use myself as an example of that. I've got this heart for the people down at Moore Square in Raleigh, and they are my people now, and it's the highlight of my week when I'm down there on Sundays and Monday nights. And I was down there last night, and I met 4 people that were sleeping under the overhang of a church, and I went up and asked. I had some clothes with me last night, and two of them had sleeping bags, not great sleeping bags, but they had sleeping bags. And one woman said, if I just had a sleeping bag, and I was like, oh man, if I'd have just brought one down, So that's the backstory. The conclusion was, one of the girls at our Bible study, I asked her what she needed. And she said, well, if I just had a really nice sleeping bag, I mean, I'm sleeping outside in a tent, but I'm using blankets, and I get hot, and I keep the blankets off, and then I wake up cold, freezing, and I put the blankets back on. And I was thinking, well, I think I can fix that, because, I'm sitting there thinking, in my mind, I'm going, $100 a night in a motel, I can get these people off. That's $400, $500 for one night, right? $100 can buy a down sleeping bag. So I went, oh, okay, that's a different mindset. That's a change in my outlook, right?
Yeah.
Because what I'm trying to do is get them comfortable and safe, right? Well, a down sleeping bag in 20-degree weather still works pretty well. So I bought a down sleeping bag, and I'll have it for her next week when I go see her, right?
And that's going to help her much longer than just one night in a motel.
Right. So that is an example, in my case, of a status change, because I'm trying to do the big work, and the Lord is speaking to him and going, just $100 to get her sleeping bag and a little propane stove she can heat up her water and soup. She's going to be happy doing that. Maybe not forever, but it's better than what she's got right now. And the reality is, most of these people don't want to be in an apartment. They like being outside, and they don't want to work for the apartment, that you have to pay. So, but that status change chapter in a nonfiction book needs to be in there. You need to set the problems, and then you need to let the reader know these are the things that's going to change about you if you're going to get to the end of this story. And we need to start doing it right now. And again, that's part of that's going to be action steps. But that's the status change. So then, in a short summary of all this, the next 3 things that you're going to deal with are problems. It's going to be one problem after another problem after another problem, and each problem is harder to overcome than the previous problem, right? And this is life, right? But it's also, in many cases, the way it's the reason nonfiction books sell. It is. It's because in the end, the reader knows this was not an easy journey. But when I got to the end, I was different than I was at the beginning. And I was beat up. Yes, that's true. But I had changed along the way. And I'm not the same person now that I was at the beginning. I'm tougher. I've got more perseverance. I think, Diana, that's one reason Paul spent so much time saying, hope leads to character, character leads to this, leads to perseverance, and down the road. I mean, you start reading all that, and you're going, I don't want to do any of that. Just come on, Jesus, But Paul understood this from a nonfiction perspective. This is the progression of how characters change.
Hope is such an important thing. And I have mentioned several times, I think, on here that I've been attending Celebrate Recovery in the hope to, again, get better language, to speak with, understand my son better, but understand many of the people that I have a heart for out in the neighborhoods around me. And in the end, it's ended up blessing me. But the thing that it gives me the most is hope, because I see transformed lives. I hear their testimony. I get to do life with them, and the joy that they have every time they overcome an obstacle is, you just want to be in the overflow of that.
Yeah.
You just want to, hang out when you see somebody get that aha moment and then walk it out and see the transformation, like you said. So
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna switch examples a little bit because we're getting ready to come to the next part, the end section of chapter 2, I mean of act 2 of a story, and that is the moment of maximum angst, which is you've done all these things that were in this nonfiction book, and you were forewarned that this was the journey you were going to take. And there is the promise at the end that if you get to the climax, you may win and actually achieve the thing that you're going for. But before you get there, you have to get out of Act 2. And at the end of Act 2 is the moment of maximum angst where you are tempted to give up, right? So for that example, I'm going to use writers because we're doing writing. And so I would say for me, for a lot of writers, that moment of maximum angst is when we have written the book, traditionally or self-published, it doesn't matter. Both of them have the same issue. When you get to that, you've written the book, it's been published, you've done the marketing, you did the book launch, you have lots of people put in positive reviews, and you get to the end of Act 2 and the book does not sell. And you have no idea how it's ever going to sell. That book appears to be completely dead. That is your moment of maximum angst, because for a lot of writers, they go, well, why go on? Why keep doing this? If it's not going to pay me any money and nobody's going to know I'm writing, back to the straight feature, how many times am I going to come out here and preach? I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm still just the one guy. Nobody's come up, you know. How long am I? That's a moment of maximum angst, right? So that needs to be in the nonfiction book as well. The reader needs to see that after doing all this, they are going to hit a dark spot, a dark moment, when they're ready to give up and just say, yeah, I quit, I'm not going to do it. And again, I'm not sure nonfiction writers, a lot of them want to put all this in there, but I'm just giving you from a story standpoint, I think the reader is going to relate to this because at that point they know this is not, this guy or gal is giving me the truth. You know, nobody else is, but they're giving me the truth. In that moment of maximum angst, the writer, the author, needs to provide a glimmer of hope for the reader, so that they can go, okay, if this is reality, back to the sleeping bag, if this is my reality, homelessness, as long as I've got a safe place to sleep and a warm sleeping bag and enough to eat, I can continue to live. And as long as I've got my Bible, I can continue to read and I can make a difference in somebody else's life. I can go help one more person each day. That little bit right there would be enough glimmer of hope to get somebody that's living on the street to get up, wake up every morning for the opportunity to help one more person, because I'm able to do this, so I'm going to help one person. That's a glimmer of hope. Add that to your book. And that gets them out of Act 2. And then in Act 3, there is the moment of the climax where they're walking to the cross, whether they're actually going to win or lose the thing they want. And here I think they're going to win or lose the thing that they wanted at the beginning. And here I think is where we need to add the encouraging stories, right? We've gone through the dark areas. We've given the bad stuff. In Act 3, I think to what you said in the example, we need case study stories where the outcome was in a positive way. Don't focus on the negative no more. Right. Let's focus on the positive. These are the encouraging stories. These are the ones that work. We're not promising it's going to work for you every time, but for these individuals, they went through the process and it worked for them, because that is hope. So you end on the up, you end on the hope. And then you encourage the reader to write their story at the end of the book. Write it out. This is the way I would like, this is the vision I have for my outcome based on what I've read. This is the vision I have, and write it out. And then print it out. And then post it up so they can look at it over and over again and go, that's where I'm going. I'm going there. I'm going there. Something like that.
A really great book. I wish I had it to hold up, but can I mention this book by John Snyder? It's called Your 100-Day Prayer, and Thomas Nelson published it. And the awesome thing about it is it's talking about you have a decision to make and you just do not know which way to go. He suggests that you bring your petition to God 100 days, for 100 days. Now, he's not saying that you're going to pray and by the end of the 100 days, you're going to get God to do what you want. He's saying that at the end of spending this time in prayer and writing things out, you're going to know exactly what it is that God has fashioned for you, and you'll make the right decision. And it's really beautiful because he talks about in there's 100 entries, and each to help us, you focus your prayer through the truth of God's word and character. And he even gives you leading prayers to give you a jump start. He gives you writing space to capture your conversations with the Father. And then at the end, you can, a concluding page to memorialize just how God answered your prayer and transformed, you through the process. So it's, I can't tell you how many times I've personally used this book at different intersections in my own life. And every time it just blessed my socks off because it was such a packed, action plan.
Yeah.
With a great outcome. It followed all the things that you mentioned,
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, so I mean that the thing about writing the vision at the end of what on that last page, I think it'll help the reader because at the beginning we remember we said, what do you want? What does Diana want? That was the second step. What does Diana want more than anything in the world? And if you ask that question in the vision early in the story, you're gonna get the utopia vision, right? But having gone through the journey, the reader, having gone through their journey based on the nonfiction book that you wrote, they're going to get to the end of that and they're going to have a more realistic understanding of what can happen. And like you said, they're going to look at it and go, well, I've changed what I want to happen.
Yes.
The outcome of this. And I'll just, again, we're talking about writers, so I'll give an example. You may say, I want to be a best-selling author with a large publishing house. That may be your utopia want at the beginning of the book. At the end of the book, you may go, I don't want that. Because to have that means I don't have a life. Because I'm on deadline. I'm doing 3 books a year, and I'm also on a speaking tour. And that means I'm not spending time with my spouse, my kids, my grandkids. I don't have time for myself. My physical being is not in shape now the way it was. And so at the end of this journey of writing, if you're writing a writing book, you're going to go, I don't want to be that. I want to be a successful writer. And my definition of success is being able to write the things I want to write or that God lays on my heart and make enough money and have enough, sales that I can continue to do that. I don't need the big one. I just need just, your vision will change at the end if you go through the process. So I don't know. In conclusion, I would say if you're a nonfiction writer, maybe try some of this and see if it works. But always, to your point, always keep the reader in mind. They are the star of the book. And if they're not the star of the book, then your book's probably not going to sell well.
Right. That's
what are your closing comments?
Well, my closing thought is just in this whole conversation, your question to me at the beginning is my answer would be totally different just in hearing the course of your conversation, this conversation, 30 minutes. So yes, and I think that's the beauty of a nonfiction book is you have a goal in mind, but Holy Spirit can totally use the book to use your words to work a little bit different, something different, but still answer and lead the person to a solution and a vision for their personal life. So yes. And I want to encourage people that have something to write it, because like we've said it in the past, how long will we have this window to
Yeah.
get our ideas and information out and come alongside people in their life journey with the freedom that we have right now. So I just want to encourage people to write what they're supposed to write. And I'm speaking to myself
Yeah, right.
as well, to take those opportunities to write.
All right, we will join y'all next week with another episode of Reality Coaching for Writers. Diana, it's good to see you, and in
Yes.
honor of being on vacation for a while, I will close with ciao.
Ciao.